Good evening, and welcome to What's Your Story? I'm your host, James Ransom Reed Jr. You know, we see it at airports, on airplanes. We see it in the supermarkets. We see it on the sports fields around the world and indeed right here at home. We see it in high school, college, and grade schools. We see it on the highways and the byways of this great nation and other nations. And yes, sadly, we even see it in our houses of worship. I'm talking about incivility. I thought it appropriate tonight to close out 2021 with a show about how we relate to, how we treat each other. I want us to think about the importance of being polite, courteous, respectful. My guest tonight is Angela Scott. She not only believes in those things, she works to make this old world a new world. If you are concerned, you want to find a way to be more civil, to act more civilly, this is a show for you tonight. And if perhaps by chance you've fallen by the wayside and civility is not so important to you anymore, it's winning your point, maybe this is the show for you as well. Welcome to the show, Angela.
Thank you, Jim.
Why don't we begin by telling our viewing audience tonight a little bit about yourself. Where did you go to school? Where did you grow up? Where were you born? Things like that.
Sure, absolutely. I grew up and was born in Worcester, Massachusetts, back years ago, quite a long time ago. And I grew up in a community at a time frame where really segregation was still going on, not actually authorized segregation, but in reality that was in. And my parents moved there from New York.
What town was this you were in?
Worcester, Massachusetts.
In Worcester.
Right. And in Worcester, my parents went into Worcester. My father was a social psychologist and was very involved in doing good by doing right and helping both the mental health of not only himself, but the community. He was one of the premier and pioneering community mental health advocates. So really got involved in the whole aspects of the well-being of the person by also looking at the well-being of the community and how people interact with each other. So he was, in fact, the first chairman of the Worcester Human Rights Commission. He was the head of the Worcester Child Guidance Association, wound up at a point he was an assistant professor at Holy Cross and wound up intervening and settling the student takeovers up there of the black students at Holy Cross. So was very, very involved. And I watched that from a young age.
What is your father's name?
John F. Scott.
Okay.
Unfortunately, he has passed on, but his legacy still continues. In fact, he wound up getting the first ever 50-year grant to study the impact of poverty, of violence, of the health conditions, the community mental health, on children's health. They were following a 50-year journey of a group of kids to see how that impacts a person's, whether they get cancer, emphysema, all sorts of other diseases that affects people, and understanding how the stress of the community and the stress of your life can impact those things.
What about your mom?
My mom also is a social worker. She was a school adjustment counselor, so she went into the schools to try to make sure that children who are having trouble, they would do home assessments, they would understand what are the factors. Is it something going on at home? Is it something in the school? How to create that balance so the student could thrive and become better. but she was also a silent advocate behind the scenes to make sure we understood what was going on in the environment around us. So yes, I got sent to school with black armbands. We wound up doing silent protests against the Vietnam War, and we marched for civil rights and all sorts of other things that really were going on at the time. And now I probably have told my age based on that. But all of this laid a foundation for both my sister and I. I have an older sister, to really look at our world in terms of what can we do to help others. It's not enough to really prosper yourself, but you need to bring others along with you, just as our ancestors had done, as others will do.
So you were standing on the shoulder, your parents helped you to realize that you were standing on the shoulders of those who came before you, who fought the fight.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, from very young, I was pretty much taught the expectation is you give back. You give back to the community, and you give back by helping others. Served actually as a student advisor to the Worcester City Council on student and educational affairs. That was when I was in high school. And did some work with the Council on Aging in Worcester and some other things. From there, I went to Amherst College. I was the third class to graduate women who had been there for 4 years. So there was still a group that the first year I was there was still a group who had come in as an all-male school. So they were still getting used to the idea of women being there. And the alumni definitely were having some troubles with that. So it was an opportunity to make change. During the course of the time I was there, there was some unrest on the campus. There was some unrest as students were protesting everything from apartheid to even just how many faculty members were there were people of color, what was happening in terms of financial aid and other things. During my time at Amherst, I did spend a semester. Instead of going abroad, I went to DC. And I wound up participating in American University's political semester, which basically you went and your teachers were the politicians, were the judiciary, were the different lobbying groups and all, so you understood the political process from the outside in.
Wow.
And it also gave me a chance to do an internship, so I worked at HUD in their Office of Management, basically, which oversaw and evaluated the grants that were being given to make sure that all the money wasn't going to bridle paths in New York City.
So wait a minute, HUD, Housing and Urban Development.
Housing and Urban Development,
Yes.
I'm sorry, yes.
Yes, okay.
But it was a wonderful experience to see what kind of oversight the government has to make sure that there's equity in how money is distributed. And most people don't see that behind the scenes, that
Yes.
they're making sure nobody's giving all the money to some kind of private yacht club and wherever, that it's going to things that
Where
would
it's
help
supposed
the
to go,
community.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know, Angela, I don't hide my age. I'm old as Methuselah. So, but there was a period in my life growing up where I was taught deliberately, respect your elders. Mm-hmm. You know, you don't talk back to people. Mm-hmm. You never, ever use profanity, period, in public or private if you can avoid it. And today, I know I sound like my father, you know, who was telling me about how horrible my generation was. But, you know, as I look around today and I see the lack of civility, I mean, just in young folk. Mm-hmm. And I'm not attacking just young people. I'm saying I see it in people who were I was once their age, and I would never have even thought of behaving like that. Mm-hmm. What happened?
Good question. I mean, is there one point in time where this broke apart? I really can't say, because I think over time it was a slow eroding of civility, of respect, of how people deal with each other. Part of it, you could say, goes back to the whole Wall Street 80s money, 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 and all of the corporate raiders and
Yuppies.
make money.
Yeah.
Well, make money and at the expense of other things.
Oh, yeah. No, those weren't the yuppies. They were there's a name for them.
The
yeah.
Wall Street Wolves or whatever.
Yeah, whatever they were. But I'll think of the name. But yeah, it was about money. It was about
money and self-indulgent and spending on everything. Nobody thought to stop and say, maybe I need to use some of this money for good.
Or maybe I don't need as much as I'm getting.
Correct. And maybe I need to look at the consequences of what I'm doing and how it impacts others. I think part of it might have gone back to Nixon. At that point, here was somebody who symbolized the fact of doing what he wants at the expense of everybody else. And that, I think, was a rude awakening for so many people in this country who are so used to your commander-in-chief, your president, is somebody who symbolically represents what's good in the...
Everybody. You represent everybody.
And that went away when we saw he lied and cheated and did other things. And
in short, when I was growing up, we couldn't even say a bad thing about the president in my house. I mean, it didn't matter which party the president was from. In my house, we never attacked the president in a way that you hear now. So, I see social media, which has made it incredibly easy to hide behind a computer and say all kinds of things that we had no access to and probably wouldn't have anyway. As I look at the political world, I think you're touching on something very important. There was a trust, a level of trust, a belief that was real. It's like when President Kennedy was assassinated, the country was stunned because we just couldn't conceive of something like that happening in our nation to our president. Another American doing that to our president. It was a sense of duty. It was a sense of honor. World War II, as I read history and love history, we had to pull together to get our scrap metal and get our rubber together and do the food stamps and the sugar stamps and the gas cards and all that. We had to work as a nation. Roosevelt, I think, was a genius at getting people to understand you are your brother's keeper.
Right.
And if we are to pull through these things, we have to do it together. I agree with you that doesn't seem to be as important anymore.
No, and when you think about it, I love to look back on Roosevelt and some of the things that happened with there, because people didn't think twice about saying we are sacrificing for the greater good.
Absolutely, yes.
Unfortunately, now with part of what you're seeing out there is the thought of, I don't have to do anything if it's not comfortable for me.
Right.
If it's not in my best interest.
Right. What's in it for me?
If it doesn't help others. Exactly. I probably shouldn't go there, but the whole mask mandate and the whole vaccine, when you think about it, it's something to help each other.
Yeah, you're doing something to help your fellow man in addition to yourself. As I'm fond of saying, you have an absolute right to gamble with your health. You do not have a right to gamble with others.
Right, and when you look at, we've had polio vaccine requirements.
God.
We've had requirements for all sorts of...
We've rolled up our sleeve for years.
Yeah, we rolled up our sleeves. We didn't think twice about it. We saved our scrap metals in the Second World War.
Yeah, we did
what we had to do. And yeah, there were some problems along the way, but as people came and matured, they realized, okay, we can make a difference, whether it's opening up voting booths and voting opportunities, or whether it's funding preschool for inner city kids. All of those things, Head Start, made a difference in helping balance and helping give everybody an opportunity. Yeah. And we seem to forget that some of the time.
Somehow we made a turn away from those things. And I'm interested very much in what you're doing at Avon Congregational Church, of which you are a member. As I understand it, you have written and been granted
The Avon Congregational Church is, first of all, a wonderful church. And one of the things we've done was, with our members, we've been expanding. We want to meet people where they are and make sure people understand, look, the churches sometimes have had bad reputations for taking certain positions.
Well-deserved bad reputations,
and we want to tell everybody, you're welcome here, regardless of who you are or what you are.
Right.
We're not judging you.
Yeah.
And one of the things we've been doing is try to educate. The church as a whole has had a long history of social outreach, but we wanted to expand to also help our members understand, what does this mean? How do you do it? How does that work in today's society?
How do we do Christ's work?
Exactly.
In this world.
And one of the things we did was we created a social and environmental justice ministry, and that's the one that I'm a chair of. And we first surveyed the congregation to find out their interests and what they wanted to learn more about. And we dealt with racism first, we dealt with environmental issues, next up is human trafficking. And part of the emphasis is on understanding, educating ourselves so that we can go out and help educate others and do good in the world. We were very fortunate. The Hartford Foundation had an opportunity for a grant to be given to do some work to give back to the community.
Yes.
And our group applied for and won a grant which will allow us to conduct civility training in the community. We are bringing in a group that specializes in civility and politics, actually. And what they will be doing is teaching people how to have political differences without discourse.
Without demonizing the other side.
Exactly. Those days of, it's okay to say we have a difference, but let's come together to find out where the middle ground is, seem to be gone. So we wanted to come back and say, how can we bridge that gap? How can we make it so that people don't have animosity toward each other just because they have a different opinion or a different view of an issue? And in March, the end of March, on the 26th, we'll be bringing in these trainers and doing 2 sessions, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. First come, first serve for signups for people in the community.
March 26, 2022.
2022.
What time?
It will start at 9 for the first one. They run 4 hours, and then one would do the second one. And for Micah, that we'll be able to do it live. That's the intent right now, as long as COVID gets a little bit more controlled.
Yes.
But we're really looking forward to what this can do and how to have a dialogue and some education about how can we disagree without being disagreeable.
We are not enemies.
No.
We're not. We just have a disagreement. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean you're my enemy.
Exactly.
It just means we disagree, and that we should be able to set an example and work it out. One of the things that disappoints me is I used to go to baseball games. Mm-hmm. I don't go to baseball games anymore, partly because of the price of the tickets, but I see grown men running on the field, getting into fistfights with children in the stands.
Yes.
And I've been an umpire, not a professional umpire, but I've been an umpire, and I've tried to set an example on the field for the children. Let's remember the children. So a pitcher buzzes you, okay, and some long-held grievance that you still have a responsibility to behave. What would happen if there was no buzzing, or if people didn't run on the field to fight and act like 2- and 3-year-olds? What example would that set? Mm-hmm. Things like that, because they look up to sports figures, our young folk. They still do. I did. I grew up with sports heroes, and they set an example. Hank Aaron was mine, as a matter of fact.
Jackie Robinson. I mean,
Jackie Roosevelt. Althea Gibson. FloJo. Let's try. And I so appreciate what you're doing in actually bringing things to fore to teach people how we can live together and be civil with one another.
It's very important that people, the old adage about walk a mile in the other's shoes. Even if you don't agree with somebody, understanding where their position is, how they came to that, and where you can find your middle ground. That's so critical not only in our state and our society and our community, but also in government. With the passing of Bob Dole, I think we lost somebody who truly was one of the last ones to say it's more important we reach across the aisle.
A statesman.
To find a solution than to sit and say it's my opinion and I'm right because it's my opinion.
Yes, yeah. You're not in my party, you're wrong. Everything you do is wrong. We are the only ones who know how to do it right.
And in my opinion, if each one of us just took one little step to try to understand another opposite opinion, to try to see where you can have a common ground and try to work toward that understanding, the world would be a much better place. We'd all be much better, and that's what I'm trying to accomplish.
What thoughts do you have as you close out 2021 about civility?
I have to be optimistic. I have to hope that we've reached rock bottom on these issues and that we'll move together to try to work as a whole instead of as a sum of different parts. Because that's the only way we will be successful, not only as a country, but as a world.
Either we will learn to live as brothers and sisters, or we will perish as fools.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow. Listen, I can't thank you enough for coming here and talking about your mission and your work and trying to make the world a more civil place. Once again, what is the church that you attend and where is it located?
Sure. Avon Congregational Church. It's at 6 West Main Street in Avon. Our services are at 10 o'clock on Sunday mornings, and they're also live streamed on Facebook, so people can find it by looking up Avon Congregational Church on Facebook, or also with our Pastor Chris. I call him Pastor Chris. There is a website there, church.org. And there will be information on there about some of the ministry we're doing. We put information out in our e-tidings, which is a weekly bulletin about did you know, facts about social issues, events that are happening in the community that are of interest. And we'll put information about the signing up for the civility training.
I hope the message was sent today that I want to make this world a better place. I want to treat my fellow man with dignity and respect, and I'd like to have him do the same for me. That's all the time we have for tonight's show. Thank you for joining. I'm your host, James Ransom Reed Jr. What's your story? Everybody has a story. Until next time, good night.